Hello, dear colleagues. My name is Michala Mikolášíková and I am the PhD student at the University of Hradec Králové in the Czech Republic. Please let me present the essential outputs of my research called The Beginnings of Ecofeminism and the Czech Emancipation Movement. Sociological studies date the beginnings of ecofeminism to the end of the 60s of the 20th century. Thanks to my study of professional literature dealing with the emancipation movement in the Czech environment and material analysis and gynocritical interpretation of selected texts by Czech women authors, it became clear that the basic ideas of ecofeminism were already formulated in the first third of the 20th century. The emancipation movement was a long-term process in which we can observe changing tendencies, developments, and ideological shifts for individual periods, not only at the level of nationally constituting efforts, but also regarding status and self-awareness women and their role in society and in the artistic sphere. As in other smaller European states, the emancipation in the Czech environment was closely connected with the idea of national reveal. From the point of view of historical development, the achievement of individual emancipatory and national goals and the penetration of women into the public sphere, the process of emancipation and its connection with the national reveal has long been in the center of interest of researchers in our country and is professionally very well monitored. Thanks to the connection of the women's movement with national liberation, a specific space for women artists, especially writers, was created in the Czech cultural environment. In the individual historical boundaries of the Czech emancipation process, we can follow the changes and development of the social status of women, both on the basis of the life examples on women writers and on the basis of a gynocritical interpretation of their text on how the female authors depicted these changes in their works. Literary performative talks about it provide us with information that is different from the linearly historically preceded knowledges about the emancipation movement when interpreting texts. The choice of topics, typology of characters, and the depiction of contemporary gender stereotypes by female authors in literature can be a valuable guide to the real contemporary state of women's social status in society and bring new insight into research in the field of gender studies and as is emerged from our research not only in this field. Our research interests are female writers and their texts in the first third of the 20th century, in the period when the main effort of national reveal was completed. The establishment of an independent Czechoslovak state, many emancipatory efforts were fulfilled, for example, suffrage for women, abolition celibacy for female teachers, right to divorce. As previous research has shown, none of the female authors of the observed period is currently included in the Czech literary canon. They are taught very marginally in schools and fall into readers' oblivion. The same fate was originally intended for the prominent Czech philosopher and writer Anna Pamrova. Her work was discovered by chance, and in the Czech professional philosophical environment, more attention was paid to it only after 2000. Anna Pamrova is known to a wider professional public as a friend of the important Czech symbolist poet Ottokar Březina. The reason for the deeper lack of interest in Pamrova's personality can be seen not only in the Czech historical development after the Second World War, the more difficult accessibility of her texts, but also because of her excessive visionary and perhaps too progressive ideas for period in which she lived and created. Despite never professional works and articles about the author, and the popularization activities of the Anna Pamrova Society, the intellectual contribution of her work is not fully appreciated. On the basis of a gynocritical reading and hermeneutic interpretation of Pamrova's essayistic, journalistic, and personal text, especially letters, we discovered that their ideological direction and thematic definition touch on the question of the position of women in society, criticism of the education system, warnings against the consequences of progress, and environmental issues. Is the connection between the woman's question and interest in environmental issue and sustainable lifestyle, by which ecofeminism is defined by experts. That led us to the idea of naming and summarizing those topics that are in Pamrova's text in accordance with ecofeminist ethic and its principles, and to demonstrate that the idea of the Czech author, who is almost unknown to the public today, are not an anachronism but a visionary concept. When reading and interpreting the ideas in Anna Pamrova's texts, we ask ourselves whether her ideas are in the line with the ideas of the ecofeminism movement. Since ecofeminism itself is stratified into several directions, to which of them is Pamrova closest in terms of opinion? Based on the results of the interpretation, is it possible to consider a change of perspective on the ecological feminist tradition in the context of the former Czechoslovakia and behind its borders? How the author herself positioned herself and how she defined herself within the emancipation movement? Based on the study of professional text on the development of the emancipation movement in the Czech environment and the specific position of Czech women writers in it, we found that within the historical boundaries of emancipation efforts, we can include Anna Pamrova, taking into account the dating of most of the texts among the authors of the fourth stage of the emancipation development in our country. Unlike her generational contemporaries, the novelist Růžena Svobodová, Tereza Nováková, or younger Božena Benešová, Pamrova's texts represent easy essay writing and to a lesser extent poetry. In contrast to the artistic rendering of the fates of female heroes, she deals with selected topics such as motherhood, issues of the social status of women, the educational system, animals' rights, and the topic of civilizational progress and nature protection are burning for her. It's precisely because of the connection of the woman's questions with environmental issues that we considered her proximity to the ideas of the ecofeminist movement, which developed 3 decades after her death. Regarding the very perception of the author and her inclusion in the process of emancipation, Pamrova, like her Anglo-Saxon peer Virginia Woolf, rejects the label of feminists when she writes about women active in the emancipation movement, and the emptying of the female gender with the usual annoying substitutes for freedom praised by Bragg, with all the consequences of the unforeseeable concealment of a woman's desire for light power, we turn away from them. According to Pamrova, the starting point for liberation of women is not the achievement of equality in a society created by men, but a deep transformation of the entire social system. She calls the current state his own neologism, pacivilization and summarism. There is not the slightest doubt that with this false culture and pacivilization, everything that should have beautified and perfected the generation has been degraded and disfigured in woman. With this approach to the issue of emancipation, she defined herself within the established customs and opinion of female writers on emancipation efforts and differs from her colleague in opinion. It is precisely because of her polarizing opinion and the absence of a successor who would continue or at least describe her visionary ideas that we believe that the author was neglected by subsequent generations of readers and experts. If we leave aside the thematic definitions of Pamrova essayistic and journalistic texts, her lexicon is already close to the dictionary of the ecological movement. She uses a capital initial letter for nature. If she writes about it directly, she speaks metaphorically of her as a great mother. In connection with her, she speaks of temple of the eternal mother. She then refers to the current situation of women as a straitjacket, calls the followers of the emancipatory current within the patriarchal structure of society evaists, and men who subjugate women phallicists. For example, she writes about them, man, a man, in order not only to be defined from animals, but to be able to elevate his family above all creation. The dominance of man, or phallism, not only over women but also over children and the enslavement of animals, in general is one of Pamrova's common ideas from ecofeminist ethics, which we find thematized in many of her texts. Another common theme of Pamrova and the followers of the ecofeminist movement is the warning against scientific and technological progress, in which the origin of the unconsolable state of our planet is seen. In connection with it, Pamrova also condemns the misuse of technology for war purposes. Pamrova then blames technical devices such as airplanes and automobiles for the death of plants when she writes, hit by the mess from airplane exhaust. According to the author, replacing human work with technology leads to the poverty of people, but also to the plundering of nature. Part of the world is being turned into ruins by progress. In contrast to the technical convenience, which she calls Faustian and culture, we find in many places in her text the adoration of the free landscape and nature. She warns against its exploitation as follows, you can see in the presentation. Due to the excessive necessity of economic production, Pamrova also warned against the overpopulation of the human species of Earth when she writes to her sister Eleonora. You already have 2 grandchildren. For God's sake, let them not multiply. In 1,000 years, there would be one so-called person for every square meter of the Earth's surface. Anna Pamrova sees the future of humanity pessimistically if the desired transformation does not occur. It will not be a war, nor a plague, nor a famine, nor a flood that will wipe out this unsuccessful tribe. It will be a fiery whirlwind of sexual monsters that will dry up and burn to ashes the roots of the nation which the great sun did not shine at birth. She assumes the human apocalypse caused by an incorrectly grasped sexual drive in many places in her texts. She pays great attention to the incarnation as such and talks about its transcendental potential, especially in the work about motherhood, where she explains this issue as land. Pessimistic conclusions about the future of civilization were also confirmed by the German philosopher Theodor Lessing, with whom Pamrova corresponded and whose work she translated into Czech, when he wrote, "The thinker lowers his eyes with a feeling of guilt, because the innermost voice knows, Auntie Eva Pamrova is right." Using sample of at least short quotations, we try to outline the thematic definition of Anna Pamrova's works. Thanks to the findings from the study of professional literature dealing with defining the development of the ecofeminist movement, we have concluded that the ideological content of the direction is, in the mentioned respects, identified with ideas presented in the essays, articles, diary, and letters of the great Czech philosopher and writer in the first third of 20th century. The result of the finding obtained taught the hermeneutic and gynocritical interpretation of the author's text in comparison with findings from professional literature. We can declare that Pamrova was a unique visionary pioneer of emancipatory and ecofeminism ideas in the Czech environment.